Hello and welcome to another AstroHistorian live stream. My name is Paul, Berserker01, Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender here at the Astro Pub, your professor on the AstroHistorian. This is a channel dedicated to... I might have messed it up. Welcome. Hello. Getting loose with this. Mason, how you doing? So, this is a live stream where we talk about Star Citizen lore. Well, we don't just talk about Star Citizen lore, but that's the main focus. We'll talk about other lore at some point. An attempt was made. It's Monday, and I could do the full spiel, but you know, not too bad. Sorry, I missed the expedition yesterday. Worked overnights, passed out a little longer than I expected. That's totally fine. We had a fun time. Is this the knowledgeable lore person I see? How's it going? Hey, EV2. Yes. Oh, hold on. Let me make sure I got this one done. It's already done. Do. Just updating the latest I forgot to upload stuff to Spotify. Season 9, episode 22 for the Captain's Table.
Get out and we talk to people.
Sorry, give me a moment, chat. Okay, she's smart ass. There we go. How you doing, Zach? The point is you tried. My keybinds were reset with 4.2. Just thought it was the weather for a few days. It was. Oh yeah, that can happen. So I've had my my keybinds didn't get reset, but my settings sometimes get messed up. Where like I invert my roll and I invert the throttle. The CIG seems to just reset that every so often. Waiting a few more moments for everyone to come in, but today we're going to be talking about Hathor. Because there's actually a lot of information about Hathor now, and I do want to go through and figure out how to... to figure out how the rise and fall of their whole thing. Before I get to Star Citizen history, any thoughts on the Arbites update for Darktide? Haven't played it, so I couldn't tell you. I think it looks cool. Sounds cool. Hey, welcome everyone from Mac. This is different. It's a different time stream, new scheduling, sort of new scheduling for the summer. So typically these streams would be on at around 8 p.m. Eastern. But for this, I've been doing them earlier for this one specifically for the summer because I have the time to do it for the summer, and it gives me more time to work on stuff in the evenings and to spend time with my family in the evenings. So, how you doing, Mac? How goes the run? I know you're doing a no resources run, right, in Star Citizen? But welcome everybody. This is my AstroHistorian live stream where we talk about the lore of Star Citizen. I've been waiting a few more minutes to let people kind of come in and be doing. We're talking about the Hathor Group, the rise and fall of the Hathor Group. I mean, Hurston and ArcCorp aren't the worst corps. Where do you think Hurston and ArcCorp got their ideas from? Maybe this way. Hathor was doing awful stuff before Hurston even existed. I'm gonna double check that, but I'm pretty sure Hurston was founded after. Yeah. Yep. Hurston was founded the same year, or not the same year, but 30 years before Hathor owned an entire system. Hathor was founded in 2399. Hurston was founded in 2438. So Hathor was a POS, 30, 40 years before Hurston existed. Will there be a fully edited lore episode for the subject? Eventually, yes, but not currently at the time. The way I've been doing these is more sort of a brief overview, kind of a look at some of this stuff, and mostly just kind of chat because, live streams are kind of cool and people like to watch them. But I also use them as sort of a test to see if there's interest enough in this. I think there is, because Hathor is now an actual place in game. People can go to the Hathor facilities in Stanton. I'm almost able to do it. I think there's a little bit longer we need for a little bit more information we need from Hathor to really understand who Hathor was, because we don't know a lot about their founding. We know they were founded in 2399, but they are pretty awful. Already off the bat when they first show up as buying an entire system in 2468, and there would have been no way that they were even able to purchase that unless there was a deal made by the then UNE. Then UNE. Then UNE. Yeah. Oh yeah. Hadn't authorized it. You say that you aren't happy to slave away for your corporate overlords. Do I need to report your behavior to the local Hurston Citizens office? Yes. How you doing, Lance Billion? Yeah, before Hurston could even own an entire system, Hathor had been owning an entire system, or an entire planet. Hathor controlled an entire system for hundreds of years. Hathor was so bad that it created a quagmire for the UEE that is currently still ongoing. Hathor created one of the worst police and military disasters in UEE history that is still happening. Yeah, it's soundboard. It kind of works, but it's also fun to do it because a lot of people like it. But it takes a lot more effort to do a edited video as well. So live streams are a little bit easier for me to pump out more frequently. There will be another video coming out for the TheAstroHistorian soon. That will be coming out Wednesday. I was bogged down in another video for my other channel for a bit, and finally got over what I was doing and get it done. So, but this one's gonna be a simpler video. It's sort of the wrap up to the ships of the UEE Navy. It's the miscellaneous ships. We'll be covering some of the various different ships, like the A2, like the militia ships, like the 325A, the 600I, the G12, the Freelancer Miss, those sorts of things. The Vulture, the Cutlass Red. These are sort of like the support background ships that exist that are technically part of the UEE Navy, but they're not like front lines. It's kind of like how I'm sure most militaries in the world have at least some civilian like vehicles, just because you need a civilian vehicle sometimes. I've already mentioned the military version of the Hull E Admiral Griffiths, and it's in the support ships of the UEE Navy. Because I did the subcaps. I did the capital ships, the subcapital ships, and I think I talked about the Hull E in the subcaps. And then I talked about the fighters and bombers, and this is sort of the miscellaneous. So, like the Hawk, for instance. I didn't mention the Hawk because the Hawk is kind of a fighter and kind of not. Thank you, Mamoto. Hey, Toes. Hey, Charles, how you doing? Yep, commercial pattern vehicles, as we call them in Canada. Things like standard pickups, panel vans, macrobuses, yeah. Like, I'm sure the U.S. military has buses. Actually, I know they have buses. They're just like school buses, which are just for driving people around. Like, getting recruits from pickup points to training, probably used for, various transportation just in civilian environments. That's kind of what the UE has. Like, there's like a 600I that the UE military uses, that's for like VIP transports. So So it's like a modified version of the 600i, which I think has a little bit more armor and has a little bit more guns, but it's just a 600i. That would be a very short. That would be a very short, short lore video. The ships of the advocacy, because there's like one. How you doing, Tomato? Welcome over from Tomato Stream. I've been waiting a few more minutes for people to show up, but we're gonna be doing. We'll be talking about Hathor. How was your discussion? How was your look at the social systems of Star Citizen? I felt really bad because I didn't know that they even mentioned beacons in the last CitizenCon. Because like maybe I'd stepped out from the from the broadcast when it was going on, but like I hadn't seen them talk about like an update to the beacon system. Sounds good, but I'd like to see it. Exactly, and that sort of keeps their normal civilian 12-volt electrical system, as in contrast to the actual military and operational support vehicles, which have 24-volt electrical systems, military lighting, and combat radio mountings. Yeah, my father-in-law worked on F-14s. He worked on the communications and the radar systems for F-14s. So his job was to maintain that. So he was an electrical. Like he did a lot of electrical work. So he talked about how like those systems are so unique and so bespokely built for the military. There's no like crossover with civilian. It's just so different in terms of how the electrical systems work. Yeah, that's what I was talking about, Shadow Fox. I thought that they hadn't even brought up fixing the system forever, and then someone mentioned in one of my live streams like they talked about it at CitizenCon. I'm like, no, they didn't. And then someone's, yeah, it's on this one. And I was like, okay, I'll go look at it. And I went and looked at it. I was like, God damn, they did talk about it. It's not extensive, but enough to be like, okay, I see what they're doing. But they have a Cutlass advocacy version? Nope, there is no Cutlass advocacy version. The advocacy does not use the Cutlass blue. It was marketed towards the Cutlass, toward the advocacy, but they never purchased any, that we know of. The only ship that the advocacy uses that we know of is the Avenger Stalker pattern. Though there are famously agents who use the Avenger Titan, which is where we get the Avenger Titan Renegade from, because that was the name of the Avenger that was used by a advocacy agent. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, who was the SAIC of the Bremen system. He famously pulled out his he swapped to a Titan variant from his Stalker variant because he was dealing with smugglers mostly, and so he needed more speed. So he wanted to drop all of those pods, and what the smugglers thought that meant was that he didn't take prisoners. So he leaned into that notion and called his ship the Renegade. So he was known as this basically, U.S. Marshal is the equivalent who doesn't take prisoners. He just deals with lawbreakers. In reality, it's because the Bremen Defense Force is super good and they're super reliable. So he just relied on them. So whenever he'd catch a smuggler, he would detain them and then wait for the Bremen Defense Force to show up, which would be pretty quick, and get the smuggler and put him away. Bremen's a huge place for smugglers. So in honor of the famous Renegade Titans, why we have the Avenger Titan Renegade. All right, I think we've waited enough time. We've been doing this for about 20 minutes. Let's go into the Hathor Group. All right, so for those of you who don't know, the Hathor Group was founded in SEY, which is Standard Earth Year, 2399, which makes it one of the oldest corporations that we've heard of in the verse. To put this in perspective, as I said, Hurston, which is fairly old, it's one of the oldest that's still around, was founded 30 years after Hathor's founding. And they weren't really well known. It's that we know of, like there's no references to them, but they were definitely powerful enough as a mining corporation that they were able to purchase a system that was discovered by the UEE, or not UEE, at the end, UNE. UNE Pathfinders had discovered this system, and it was off of the Cathcart system. So the Cathcart system was this system which was supposed to be this sort of nexus of intelligence gathering. So they were going to build a giant relay station for communications in Cathcart because there just wasn't a lot there. But it was in a unique place where a lot of the UNE wanted it to be further away from civilian traffic, but close enough to central, UE hubs to be able to act as sort of a central distribution of information. So information would be sent to them, and then they would be able to process it and send it out. And while they were building this station, they discovered this new system, and they had no idea what to do with it. So in a bid, the government sold the system to the Hathor Group because the government had a budget shortfall. And they were, during that time, I believe it was the Universalists who were in power, were like, we need to win re-election badly. So they made a deal with the Hathor Group where the Hathor Group would buy the system from the UEE, and they'd use that money to cover the budget shortfall, which basically won them the election. So the Hathor Group, by that point, was clearly super powerful in terms of they had the money to buy a system and enough money to cover a budget shortfall in a government. So it was probably a pretty big company. And this was in 2468. As a result, the system they purchased was unofficially nicknamed the Hathor system. Now, the Hathor system itself was then many different discoveries were made from the Hathor system, including famously, if I remember correctly, it was Hades was discovered from the Hathor system. But Hathor was allowed to purchase the system with the caveat that they had to police it. They had to enforce UNE laws while they were there. And they said, we solemnly swear we will police UNE laws. I'm doing a dramatic pause because I can tell you right now that they lied through their fucking teeth. Hey, penguins. Yeah, it was good to see you too. So yeah, they didn't. They didn't care. They were just like, whatever. And as the system became harder to mine, and as the profits were kind of dropping, they just abandoned sections of the planets of the system that there's no profit in patrolling anymore because there's no stuff to get. So slowly but surely, outlaws began to come in and make a home in the Hathor system. But as time went on, they became worse and worse in terms of their production until eventually they made a last gasp because in 2453, the Stanton system was discovered. And at the time that the Stanton system was discovered, there was not a lot of interest in the system from outside forces, except from mining companies. In fact, famously, the Flysa, which is the wreck of the Javelin that's on Daymar, was lost because wildcat miners were sneaking into the system to mine the Stanton system because there was profit to be had and there was a economic recession that was going on. This is sort of the pit of the bottom of the cargo crisis, which had started at the turn of the 29th century, where because the UEE had a revolution and the measures had been overthrown, many of the companies that made civilian craft or maintained civilian craft just disappeared because they were aligned with the measures. So there was just no real civilian cargo systems that worked anymore. Argo was still around, but they didn't make long-range cargo stuff. So it was MISC who was formed specifically to deal with this problem and created the whole series to solve the problem, which worked. But one company cannot make a billion spaceships overnight. So things got really bad towards the end of towards like the middle of the 29th century, the 2800s, and that's when we see Stanton being discovered. So we're sort of seeing this time when people aren't really interested in expanding because the UEE has sort of pulled back some of its resources to defend the frontier because it was too expensive, and there was a lot of distrust of colonization. And there was just a downturn in the economy. So these wildcat miners had come in and mostly had been ignored. But when the new admiral who was in charge of the Stanton system came in, she decided that enough was enough. Like, she dealt with it was just like a ship that came into mind. She was just like, we'll ignore it. But when she found out there was a huge operation that was basically strip mining Daymar, she was like, no, we can't. These people don't have licenses, and you're basically looting UEE property. So she came in with a bunch of fighters and a javelin, and from Crusader, mind you, because that's where their headquarters was what is modern day Orison. So they fly from Orison to Daymar, and in the process, a lot of things get messed up, and the javelin ends up accidentally crashing onto the planet. Partially because it came in too hot, partially because it was too close to the gravity well, and also because it was trying to chase down a fleeing ship that probably had Quantanium on it, that exploded, and then the debris from that ship, because it was pushed too hard and to try to escape, and then it exploded, and then Quantanium go boom as well. Its debris rained down into the engine intakes of the javelin and caused a fire in one of the engines. And because they had pushed themselves too hard, the engines were running too hot, they couldn't keep the fire under control, and then lost power, and they were too close to the atmosphere, and they crashed, which is where that javelin is. The entire javelin crew was dead. I think it was 50 people. So it was a pretty small crew compared to what a javelin usually runs, but it was still 50 people were dead. So that gives you kind of some context for what's going on in Stanton. It was seen as a system to be exploited for its resources. So when Hathor stepped in the same year in 2853, they actually purchased land from the UEE to mine on Daymar and on Aberdeen, which is today Daymar and Aberdeen. They weren't called Daymar and Aberdeen. They were Stanton, or whatever, it was 2-1 or whatever, 2-1A or whatever, 2A, 2B. They didn't have their names yet. At first they did pretty well, but the thing is as we've seen with the Hathor Corporation, they tend to use older techniques when it comes to mining. Specifically, they're famous for, and I'll pull this up. Okay. It's sort of blurry, but I'm going to try to read it. This was an email sent by Jonah Trevina, I believe was her name. She's the CEO of Hathor, who said, I write you today with a heavy heart After 465 remarkable years, the Hathor Group will be shuttering all operations. Despite the best efforts of me and the board, we are not able to keep the company solvent. Amidst adverse economic headwinds, onerous environmental protection laws, and increased competition over dwindling resource reserves. This isn't the way any of us wanted it to end, but there's still such to be proud about. Hathor was the first company to purchase mining rights to an entire system in 2468, now named Nexus. Many UEE officials have told me they wish the system's original name of Hathor was still being used to honor this incredible achievement. Furthermore, innovations created by this company revolutionized streamlining strip mining by allowing for faster and more efficient resource extraction. Finally, despite business being targeted by well-intentioned but overzealous politicians with the Fair Chance Act, Hathor not only survived but thrived where many other mining concerns failed. Though Hathor's story may end today, you can be certain that our legacy will endure. I love that writing. It's so filled with like corporate. We're so good for revolutionizing, destroying the environment. And while environmentalists are well-intentioned, they're the reason why we're closing. You damn dirty people who care about the Osonians. Why do you care about the Osonians when we can just strip mine their resources bare? Even the UEE, even the government wants to call the system what we had because it was ours. Such bitterness in that. But basically in 2864, they closed because they were unable to maintain profitability. Don't judge me, they're first beautiful in my shoes. And we do know, though, for instance, like the reason why we have Valakar throughout the Stanton system is actually the fault of Hathor. Because Hathor employees purchased baby Valakar. I think they may have purchased Valakar eggs from a Banu trader. And they got loose. Leave it to the Banu to be like, you buy, right? Buy it. It's good pet. Great pet. You enjoy pets. Worm's fun. Worm valuable. Take valuable pet. You will not be sorry. Banu. That's not to mention that, like, when Hathor went belly up, they abandoned Nexus as well, or what was the Hathor system, which was taken over by gangs. And Nexus was what's called the crossroads of crime. And that's because basically they abandoned all their facilities intact. So gangs just took over their facilities. And they started using Nexus. It's called Nexus now for a reason, because it's so connected to so many different systems, to raid into every other system nearby. Like, to give you context, here, let me pull it up and I'll let you see the Nexus system, so you can see an idea of how Nexus. Okay. All right, so let's go to Nexus. Nexus is right here. That's Hades. Nexus. I'm going to turn on jump tunnel so you can see an idea of like where it is. So it has one to Hades, one to Cathcart, one to Min, and one to Ellis. Okay, so there's 4 different sites. And to give you an idea of how close this is, there's Stanton. Stanton, Magnus, Ellis, Nexus. Nexus leads to Hades, which leads to Nemo, which then leads to Corel and Fora, which can also lead to Redder, which is one of the first systems in humanity, Croshaw and Sol. You could also, Ellis leads to Killian, which leads to Davian, which leads to Sol, and also Kano. Magnus obviously leads to Terra as well. Ellis also leads to Tyrannus, then Helios, Tyrol, Chiron, Genesis. This is all there's the Hathor system, which is this is all the Xi'an systems, and these are the Banu systems down here. So Nexus is sort of located at a major thoroughfare of trade throughout most of, it's called Nexus. And it's controlled by pirates, by outlaws and pirates. So, it won't take long. It won't take that long for Ellis to be made. Yeah, but like the major one is Ellis, which is a huge like trade to like Sol. Like say Terra to Stanton to Magnus to Ellis to Killian to Davian to Sol. That's a straight shot right there. Exactly. So when Hathor pulled out of Nexus, they basically left all of these facilities, which were perfect for outlaws to convert for their own purposes, because they're, living quarters, places where you can fabricate stuff. So basically they left perfectly functional buildings for outlaws to use for their own purposes. And it got so bad that when we had Keller's Run, which happened in the 2930s, I think, where Dean Keller ended up accidentally causing a bunch of cascading effects where he shot an undercover advocacy agent in the Cathcart system, which then he did so in a place where if you, in Spider, where if you break the law, all of the other outlaws are allowed to kill you. So it's like controlled by mutually assured destruction, where everyone kind of obeys the law, because if you don't obey the law, the response to any law breaking is just murder. And everyone just sort of agrees. It's sort of like a continental, situation from John Wick. It's like you don't conduct business in this area. If you try to conduct business in this area, we will fucking kill you, and everyone will kill you. So we got in an argument about, of all things, the Hornet. Dean Keller was a Hornet aficionado. He loved his Hornet. And the guy he was arguing with, who was the undercover advocacy agent, thought the Hornet was a piece of shit. And so Dean got into a heated argument about this, pulled out a gun, and shot the guy in the middle of a restaurant, like a bar. And this caused all of these pirates to be like, you broke the law, it's time to kill you. And he realized that, so he ran. What he didn't know is that undercover advocacy agent was also being monitored by advocacy agents. So they saw and began to chase after him too. So you had outlaws and then the advocacy chasing him, and he managed to evade them and escape, going on a huge run where he was, where eventually bounty hunters were brought up to him. It was like 2 days of straight pursuit, which no one was able to get him. And the main place he was able to go from place to place was Nexus. Nexus was the huge spot where it was very difficult to try to track him. And so the absolute nightmare of Keller's Run, which made the advocacy look like fools, ended up causing the UEE to say, all right, we have to deal with Nexus. So they invaded the Nexus system. The UE Navy and the Advocacy entered the Nexus system to declare war on the Outlaws. And while they were able to win the conflict, they weren't able to win the peace, because Outlaws kept coming back to these Hathor locations, which were abandoned. And the Navy didn't want to destroy those locations because they could be used for full settlement, because what the UE's goal was to kick out all of the Outlaws and then settle their own people into the system to stabilize it, specifically Advocacy families. So families of Advocacy members were given free land in the Nexus system as a means of compensation, but also as a way of trying to encourage settlement. And this led to the Walzer Massacre, where one of these stations, where all of these people had been kept waiting for their time to go down to settle the lands, was invaded by an outlaw group which had been kicked out of the Nexus system and then came back. And when they came back to the station because they knew the station was a great place to like get it, and they just killed everyone. And these were like civilians mostly, so they just slaughtered an entire like families of Advocacy members, like full blown. We don't even know. I don't even know the numbers. I have to look them up, but I think it's like 100 plus people. And they were so dug into the systems that the only way they could get them out was by calling in the Marines. And even then it was bloody. And it became sort of like a hallmark of, you cannot tame the Nexus system because it's a quagmire. Every time they push out the outlaws eventually come back. Yeah, he shot an Advocacy agent. He was an undercover Advocacy agent. So yeah, like Hathor's legacy is that of complete failure. Like they worked their workers to death. They exploited them as much as possible. They didn't care about following any UEE law or UPE, UNE, UPE, or UEE law. They didn't care. They just did what they wanted to. And everywhere they went, they made things worse. So while I know a lot of the reason why we have Hathor in the Stanton system is because CIG had Hathor assets, but it also narratively makes sense that Hathor would show up in the Stanton system because their presence has already made it worse. Hopefully that gives you a context of Hathor. But we're still missing a little bit about their origins, and we're still missing about that middle part where they were between the like decline of profits in Nexus and the like desperate last gasp in Stanton. What was their relation with the Mezzers? Probably indifferent. The Mezzers were smart enough to know which companies to fuck with and which ones not. The later Mezzers, not so much, but especially Ivor. Like, they didn't mess with RSI until later, and then that was probably one of the reasons why they fell. But that's a good example. We don't know what their relationship with the Mezzers were. My assumption is, based off the fact that they were still fairly profitable up until the end of the Mezzer era, was they're probably fairly neutral, if not positive, with the Mezzers. Hathor's legacy is trying to pull a Hurston and rolling a Nat 1 while defusing an antimatter bomb, effectively. But like their blueprint of how to control a system for a corporation became the blueprint of why Stanton is so bad right now. Like, and it's also where Pyro tried Pyro wasn't even discovered when Hathor had taken over the Nexus system. To give you that context, Pyrotechnic Amalgamated was using a Hathor's blueprint. They were using Hathor's blueprint to turn their system profitable, because Pyrotechnic Amalgamated is also a mining company. And we see how well Pyro did. If you get what I'm saying. I wonder if you had a large enough org, you could at least take part of Nexus. Yeah, probably. Because players don't have to deal with the whole like UEE approval ratings. Public approval ratings. Yeah, I need a little bit more information from Hathor before I make a full video on that. But basically, what I just laid out would be the discussion. Like, this is the situation of how the system was discovered. You know, Hathor takes over the Nexus system, which is called Hathor. They sort of slowly devolve and like as more people discover what's going on, you know, that kind of thing. Like, they discovered the Min system. Outlaws discovered the Min system and the Hades system well before UEE did, because they found them from Nexus, well, Hathor at the time. And then as they start to get less and less profitable, they make a last desperate gasp to produce facilities in Stanton. The employees are so overworked and underpaid that you know, the best companion pet they get is a freaking Valakar, which then causes Valakar to spread all over the Stanton system. They are. I mean, internally, I've heard CIG employees call them Wayland Yutani. Well, no, that's ASD. ASD is Wayland Yutani. That makes me wonder if some prior company or author that penned what became Hathor and Pyrotechnic Amalgamated Blueprint to Profitability. ASD. Yeah, ASD brought them to Pyro. They may have been there beforehand. I mean, the way that Valakar gets spread is a little unique, because they can be spread by scientists, which is that they made a joke about scientists doing it, which is obviously a reference to ASD, which is, you know, but, you know, they bought them as pets for Hathor. They mentioned like smugglers smuggling them into systems because they think they can use them for, you know, they could harvest them, like ranch them. Because, you know, how many stupid people are in the world who will do stuff like that? Or they bring an invasive species to a new environment, being like, I can use this environment to ranch these invasive species, and the invasive species destroys the environment. What is ASD? Associated Science and Development. They are a weapons manufacturer masquerading as a scientific endeavor. They mostly make neutron and distortion weapons. Exactly, Evie. Yes, by my very good body-trained space dragon. It listens very good and never eats people. And so because, adult and Apex Valakar, you can harvest them for very valuable resources. Right now it's just the teeth, but eventually the goal is for you to be able to, like, in-game, to be able to literally mine through their scales and get pearls and other things from their bodies to use them for crafting resources. I could, a stupid but somewhat talented smuggler might say, I can mine you, I can harvest you, and release them into the wild in a place like Pyro where no one gives a shit about, and then go, oh God, I made a mistake. Why are pythons in Florida? In the Florida Everglades, snakes are cute until they try to eat you. Yeah. To be fair, Wicklow didn't sell them Valakar. Another Banu did. But I 100% wouldn't put it past Wicklow. Yeah, that's Hathor. If y'all have any questions about Hathor or any other thing in Star Citizen lore, let me know. But like everything, it's all connected together. So like a lot of what Hathor's stuff is more of its connection to the messes they leave behind. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw lots of Hathor facilities in other places. Like Magnus should almost certainly have Hathor facilities. So should Ellis should probably have some Hathor facilities. And I wouldn't be surprised if CIG uses Hathor's facilities, abandoned Hathor facilities, as sort of a stand-in for outlaw encampment, because there's a lot of them. They've been around. They were around for 465 years. There's probably multiple places where Hathor was. It's probably easier to find places where Hathor wasn't. And remember, they owned a fucking star system for like 465 years. Well, for like 430 years. What's my favorite piece of the lore? The Tavaran Wars are probably my biggest ones, but that's probably because I'm still like researching them. The next complete history of Star Citizen lore after the one that's being released soon, because let me put it this way. For those of you who've been asking me about the complete history part 5, it's done. Like, it's complete. It doesn't have music yet. That's all. I literally saw a working print of it from my editor, and there was only 2 things that needed to be corrected. One of them was just it needed to have a like lip sync, because it has my character speaking and he's giving stuff that just need that lip sync. And another was just like a graphical glitch. So there's like 2 things wrong with it, and then it needs audio, and then it's done. Completely disconnected questions. Have there been any Perseus lore updates since you made your video on it? No, not really. I could probably go in and kind of give more context for it. I probably will. I'll probably turn that video into like a 40-minute video, or at least a 30-minute video. But nothing yet. I'll probably do that before Perseus comes out. Do you think it's likely that Nexus gets added to the PU eventually? Everything's going to get added to the PU eventually. It just depends on the time scale. I try to not to talk too much about the game development side of the game with this channel, with the TheAstroHistorian. So I won't answer a lot of those questions. If you want to ask those questions, I do talk about that stuff all the time on the Astropub. the Astropub Live on YouTube and the Astropub on Twitch. And I do those on especially Thursdays is my office hour stream where we talk about lore, news, and more. So we even talk a little bit about lore there too. It's sort of like a everything stream where we catch up on the latest videos, we look up the latest news, I read like the monthly reports and the roadmap updates and all that sort of thing. So. Hello, all together. I have a question about the Idris in the cargo crisis. Is there footage of an Idris used as a cargo ship? Do you think we'll get an Idris C cargo where the flight deck is a grid? Possibly, but there is no footage of it being used as a cargo ship specifically. The 3 ships that were converted, that we know of, were converted to armored haulers. This is before the P existed, so we don't know if they still had their railguns attached. They probably didn't. They were literally just Idris M's where they would haul cargo instead. We don't know if there was even a grid that was built under them or not. But I wouldn't put it past the IG to turn those into cargo grids because that's a lot of cargo. You mentioned the Hathor had more, I forget the phrasing, simple and brutish, primitive. Yeah. Do we have a comparison what the opposite approach would be for companies to do that? So yes, so Hathor's approach, we actually see it in game, which is to build facilities near high concentrations of valuable minerals, and then use an orbital laser to strip an area completely barren, or use it with enough power to be able to rip open an area, so basically like cut a hole in the earth and then get the resources out of that. Basically, mountain topping, which is an old term to basically chop the top off of a mountain and then just get the resources underneath it. Modern techniques, which were pioneered by Pyrotechnic Amalgamated, was to use, instead of doing that sort of thing, it's to use lots of smaller mining ships, which were equipped with explorer grade scanners. So the idea was to improve your scanners, so you have really good scanners which are designed to track everything in a system, and then use that to help find the most valuable pockets of resources and pinpoint mine those locations. So Hathor would be like, there's generically resources in this area, we'll build a bunch of facilities in this area so we can constantly align our giant space laser to redirect and orient this laser to fire and then strip an area bare, and then we would come in and clean it up. That requires money, it requires personnel, it requires people you have to build these giant stations to be able to align everything, and you have to build more stations around the planet or moon as you move the station around to get to where it needs to go. Yeah, Pyrotechnic Amalgamated is the one that actually revolutionized more pinpoint mining. Is there any indication of how Earth looks at this point? Do we have does it look like ArcCorp? Here we go. This is Moscow. This is Moscow. So we do have an idea of what Earth looks like. These sorts of things right here, these are a protective sort of shrink wrap. It's an energy-based thing that will actually preserve the buildings to prevent them from getting damaged. And then we also have Earth. We have New York and Shanghai. So this is what New York looks like. Capital of the UAE, mind you. Capitol building. You can see the Empire State Building here. And I think this is the old UN building, which is being preserved. You can kind of see that. But yeah, so most of Earth has been overdeveloped. In the lore, they described how they basically, anywhere that you could build, they've built on. So a lot of Earth is filled with buildings which are being mostly preserved, even though they're not being used. The population of Earth is much smaller now than it was when humanity was at its peak, even today, actually. So you can think, I always like to describe Earth as, if you've been to or you live in Europe and you go to an old city, you know, like a place that is like Siena or Venice or Naples, you know, places where they have sections of the original walled city still around. It's sort of like that, where like there are people who live around it, but there are places where people still live in these old medieval buildings, but like most people don't because they're old, but they're preserved as best as possible. But you imagine that, but then the city is like halved, like half of the city is just gone. Warsaw, yeah. And the thing is that most of people who live on Earth these days are government contractors. So you either work directly for the government, or you lobby the government, or you support the people who do those things, or you are a contractor for the government. So there are, you know, average people who live there, but you know, it's like the people who make the most money and who are the most important on Sol, or on Earth specifically, are the people who are dealing with government in some way, shape, or form. Which is, contrast that to Terra, which is almost entirely business. Like, the leaders of Terra are the business leaders. They are economic people who focus mostly on trade and focused on the new shinies and technological innovations and new products and those sort of things. So. If you could get CIG to bring out another physical book, what would you want? Something lore related? I mean, I'm biased, but I'd love to see CIG actually write something similar to what Star Wars has recently done. They did the Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, which was written by a historian as a in-fiction historical narrative, a historical look at the rise of the Galactic Empire and the fall of the Galactic Empire. So it's talking about the politicians, it's talking about the movements, the rebellion, the various things that happen, sort of like, you know, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. I'd like to have something like that, where you have the history of the UEE from the UNE to modern day. It doesn't have to be in depth, but hitting all the high points and some of the details filled in, where like CIG doesn't need to have that stuff for like gameplay necessarily. So Earth is DC and Terra is NYC. Yeah, to a degree. When you say it like that, I want UEE to stay on Earth. And that's the thing. The transitionalists believe that there's too much corruption in the UEE. The transitionalists believe that fundamentally the UEE is flawed. Its governmental system doesn't work. It doesn't actually reflect the realities of what humanity needs. And by keeping it on Earth, you're simply you're letting it fester. You're letting the corruption fester, where change can't happen because there are too many people invested in Earth as the center of government to want to change anything that might ruin that. Even if it helps the vast majority of humanity, they won't do it because it might hurt Earth. So the Transitionists, these are the mostly Terra-aligned folks, want to move the capital to Terra because at least Terra has no emotional connection to humanity. It's the planet that humanity chose, as they like to say. So when you move the capital, you could also change the government because there's less friction inside the capital to try to stop the movement. And it's one of the reasons why the UEE didn't reform after the fall of the Mezzers, because the people who had vested interests in keeping the power center on Earth were afraid that if there was a reform, they would lose power. So CIG, I think, is doing a fairly good job of illustrating the gray of the reality. Does moving the capital to Terra mean everything's going to be better? No, obviously not, because Terra is not that much better than Earth. They're a bunch of assholes on Terra. They are like smug, stuck-up pieces of shit. And do they have a better like connection with the average human? Probably not. They just know how to sell them stuff better. But they do have a point that Earth is so stuck in the way things have always been that they don't want to change. You know, is Earth the best place for humanity to be? No, but it is our home, you know. Why did the UEE government not rename itself after that's the thing, they tried to. They were trying to rename themselves to the Democratic Stellar Union, or the DSU. And part of that process of trying to rename themselves the DSU was what's called the Government Reformation Act, I think, or the government is something like that. Basically, there was a big package of laws that was going to be passed, which would rename the government, which would restructure the government, and move the capital to Terra. And there was a bunch of support for it, but there was also a bunch of backblast for it. And the people who were entrenched in Earth remaining the capital, because they could see what this reformation was going to do, was going to take power away from them, they used all of their influence to convince a large portion of the population that if they tried to do this reform, it would cause an economic recession or depression. It would ruin the economy. What they're basically saying is, if you let this economic reform happen, or this government reform happen, you will lose your jobs. And so people were frankly scared, because they had just gone through a revolution, which was violent and brief, but violent. And they had also survived, 200 years of dictatorial rule. They weren't about to just, give up their own livelihoods for the chance of maybe the government being a little bit better. It literally almost happened. There was almost a civil war that happened, because during one of the protests, protesters for the DSU and against the DSU met in Croshaw, and a fight broke out. And that fight almost turned into a full-blown riot. The police had to step in and deal with it. And the Imperator at the time, who was for the Reformation, because she was one of the major senators who was against the Mezzers, she basically knew that the longer it would take for her to get enough support for the DSU, the more risk she had of sending the entire UEE into a civil war. So she compromised and allowed a vote to go through, knowing that there was a high likelihood that her reform would fail. And it did. It failed by 1 or 2 votes. So it was very close, but it was still failed. So that gives you kind of the context of the universe. There's about 40% of humans who are just sort of, listen, I just need to get my fucking paycheck and clock out, man. I don't give a fuck about what the fuck is going on. I'm as frightened of the Vanduul because they might eat my liver, and I don't want pirates around because I want to live in safe, but I don't care. there's about, 20 to 30% of people who are like, we need to return to the Meso era where we were strong and humanity and fuck the Xenos and, various degrees of that. And about 20 to 30% of people who are like, we need to reform the government. We need to become better. We need to return to democratic roots and, get rid of these oligarchs. What do you mean? Why are you pointing at my oligarch? Stop talking about my oligarch. He's a good oligarch because he's from Terra. Thank you, Execute. How about Castro for the capital? Too close to the Xi'an border. To give you context of this whole debate, Terra and Earth have become basically the symbols for these movements. If you are pro-Earth, you are for the old ways, for the Mesers. You hate aliens. Does that mean you necessarily hate aliens? No, but that's how people see you. If you come out and say, let's keep Earth as the capital, there's a huge list of political beliefs you are signing on to according to the average person. And same thing for Terra. Let's make Terra the capital. There's a huge list of political beliefs that you're signing on to, which you may not necessarily agree with, but people like to put stuff in boxes. And I think that's a great way of putting it. My favorite corporate overlord is better than your favorite corporate overlord, and I will start a civil war over it. Yes, that's kind of how the lore of Star Citizen kind of plays out right now. Yeah, X is trying to get back into good sleeping habits, but it takes a while. Alice would be a great capital, but it's also right next to Nexus. Such comforting cyberpunk world building. Star Citizen is heavily influenced by the space and science fiction movies and other things of the 80s. Since most of the developers, or the lead developers of Star Citizen, were children of the 80s, they grew up in the 80s. They were heavily influenced by Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Aliens, Blade Runner, those sorts of movies and television shows. And as a result, a lot of Star Citizen is this Tate retrofuturism to it, but it's also dripping with cyberpunk themes, because cyberpunk is sort of the cornerstone of things like Blade Runner. If Terra and Earth are feuding, who's making sure the day-to-day rulings of the Defense and Empire? The Universalists. So the Universalists are nominally for keeping the capital on Earth, but they represent the vast majority of the average people of the UE. They are definitely corporate. They definitely want corporations to exist, but they want corporations to exist under their control. The Universalists see the government as a tool for the improvement of humanity. And they are the only ones who can truly shepherd humanity there. But they want private-public partnerships to do that, which is fine. Working with Crusader or Hurston is fine, as long as they follow the fucking rules. Kind of thing. And they're to put this in perspective, last I checked, generally speaking, 60 to 70% of the entire Senate is made up of Universalists. Suj Kosi, the only Tavaran in the UEE, is a Universalist. He's part of the Universalist Party. So, even the Tavaran believe with the Universalists. They're sort of the middle way party. And as a result, they're pretty popular. They're centrists, yeah. Which is confusing because The more conservative wing of the UEE, the anti-Xeno, pro-Mezer sort of idealists, people who the Xenothreat would be working with, are called the centralists. So you've got the centralists, the universalists, and the transitionalists. In the next update, for all 4 companies from Stanton make a run for the regen crisis. What could an example Crusader do for this crisis? For example, it's hard to tell. Like they don't all. None of them seem to have research into this, but they could easily. Companies, even though they're focused on one thing, don't necessarily only focus on it. Area 18, for instance, or Area 18, ArcCorp famously has multiple different runs. They even have like an AI division that runs it. And similar to Microtech. Microtech works with Rayari, so they have like a biotechnical biotech company sort of connection. So I wouldn't put it past Crusader to have something similar to that, like a division that deals with medicines, because they are nominally a charity organization that builds ships. How do you vote for these guys? We don't know. We've voted for them in the past on the website, but we don't know how long senators, for instance, are their terms are. So transitionalists are the people who want Terra to be the capital. So they want to like reform the government, call it the Democratic Stellar Union. They want to abolish the citizenship program. They want to incorporate more aliens into the UEE. Or into the government and into society. They give more aliens more rights, specifically Tavaran, but like Banu and Xion. They want to have a closer relationship with the Xeno races. They even want to end the war with the Vanduul if they could. They want to invest more money into the infrastructure of the UEE. So like they want to have the UEE take more responsibility for civilian infrastructure to help rebuild everything. Basically, there's a lot of transitionalists who want to take money away from the military because they think that the military is too bloated and has too much control over its own. Because the military is its own branch of government. And if you're like, well, that sounds awful. Yes, it does, because it is. The military has unchecked power over its own self. Nominally, funding comes from the Senate to the Imperator, but the military has no oversight. There is no oversight of the military. They don't have to go for an audit or anything like that. And they have their own political power because they can just do what they want because they're a branch of the government. They're not like a part of the executive branch. They're their own branch. Also, the justice system, where you have, judges and court systems, is the same as the police system. Meaning the police can only be investigated by themselves because the judges also investigate the police, and both of the judges and the police are under the High Advocate, who's the controller of the entirety of the justice system. So the transitionalists want to kind of reform the government in a way where there's more checks and balances and there is more accountability for government. The problem is that they're naive. So they're like, let's make peace with the Vanduul. It's like, we've tried that. It doesn't work. And also remember, at the corner of the transitionalists, a lot of it is also just give more power to the companies on Terra, not on Earth. That's a lot of what it boils down to as well. Yeah, basically Judge Dredd, very similar to Judge Dredd. Do you think one day we will be able to vote players into office? Maybe, but I doubt it. Because that would require a very narrow system to be created where players would have to engage with the with the political systems of the game, which I don't think they would do. They could, but I doubt it. Vanduul are mustache villains. The Vanduul, like, don't want to negotiate because that's not their culture. I'd be a terrible imperator. I'd run for imperator under the auspices of give me an ultimate power. I will become a god, the god emperor of mankind, and I will lead I will create my space marines to crush the Xenos. The Vanduul I wouldn't count as villains since villains have a plan. I'd call Duel more like a natural force of the verse. Yeah, the Vanduul are more of a disaster. They're like a hurricane or a tornado or a flood or an earthquake. They're not really doing this out of malice. They're doing it because it's their culture. You know, like, killing Vanduul actually doesn't stop the Vanduul. It just causes more Vanduul to show up. Because when you fight a Vanduul and you defeat them, and some of them flee, they will go to other Vanduul and say, we were defeated by this better opponent. And that the Vanduul who they run into will go, oh, so we can beat them if we had more, or we were better. And so, because the Vanduul are a meritocracy, their main focus is always fighting bigger battles, always getting more, being more, winning more fights. And the more you win, the more your status raises in Vanduul society. So more Vanduul will reflect that. And we actually see that in the Squadron 42 prologue. The leader of the Vanduul fleet in Vega is defeated. And his second in command, or their second in command, who's basically, I forgot his name, but he's like you've lost. He recognizes he's lost. He's like, I fucked up. I could still do something, but I fucked up. And so he seemingly willingly relinquishes command to his second in command because he's like, I am not fit to lead the clan. Here you go, lead the clan. So, like, there's even some self-reflection. It's not like probably not all of them, but, you know, at least some Vanduul would go, ooh, I messed up. No one's going to follow me now. Let's give power to somebody else. Cool. Yeah. I don't remember the names, but yeah. A locust horde, maybe? Kind of, yeah. Imperator is like Japan's leader during World War II. The Imperator is the complete, is in total control of the UEE government. However, there are some checks and balances that were put in place after the Mezer era, but it was mostly to say that the Imperator has to respect what the Senate does. And there is term limits. So for instance, you can only serve as an Imperator once in your life for a 10-year term.
I'm just an old-fashioned cowboy.
You basically are electing effectively a king with ultimate power, but they try to, in practice, and with some government reform, delegate some of that. So the Senate still has a lot of like political or like power of the purse sort of concept. So, total sidebar question regarding lore: does Aegis have any ties to Drake at any point in the timeline? No. Drake and Aegis don't hate each other though. Like, As far as I can tell, Drake has tried to troll Aegis like they trolled Misk, but Aegis has never taken the bait. We have a fighting mech now. However, we're all excited about the Titan suits. Apart from those, you think we'll have more? Yes. So Janice, I don't know if you hit the button. You push the button, and so I'm going to expose everyone to. So for those of you who don't know, I am a big fan of mechs, mecha, that sort of genre. I like big stompy robots. So if you put a big stompy robot in your story, I'm probably going to enjoy it more. So when CIG started talking about the Titan suits more in depth, I was like, lore, yes, lore of big stompy robot. Okay, so I'm going to start with this so you can get an idea. So what we see with the ATLS and the ICTI, the ICTI is sort of a modified version of an ATLS. It's not an officially produced version of the ATLS. It's made by Banu Suli as sort of a cheap knockoff version of the combat version. There is a combat version of the Titan suits, which is known as the Zeus system. And the Zeus system probably is going to get its name changed, but it was created by Virgil Ltd, the same company that makes the True Def series of armor that the Advocacy uses. So here's an idea. So as you can see, this is the concept. This isn't the final version. You can see that we have the Titan suit, and then we see how this Titan suit is operated. You see it's using the kind of gyros, and if you look at the ATLS has the same thing, only you're sort of like stick your hands out to grab them, so you're using them like this. With a Titan suit, combat Titan suit, you're fully encased, and you're sort of maneuvering it from inside your cockpit. This is another version of it, as we can see. This is probably more like the version that we will eventually get. You can see the little controller diodes inside the armor piece, but it's very similar. You can see even the way that it kind of slides down in the front, so it kind of compacts down, similar to the ATLS. But this is the key thing. This is not an arm. This is an attachment point. And then lastly, this is what it attaches into. Now, the backpack seems to have gone away, because this was the first one we saw, but I have a feeling that this is more likely what we're going to see. We're not going to see a backpack, though we may see a backpack if they want to balance out some of those issues. This is one of the things that pissed me off in Starfield, among other things. They have like, oh yeah, we used to have badass mechs. They're illegal now. Sorry. Yeah. Like, I'm sorry? Those have been good bad guy, good enemy types too, like boss enemy types I never used. The Cygnus mining drones you're talking about, the spider walkers. They're created by Greycat. They're a Greycat vehicle. They're semi-autonomous. They can be used on autonomous, but they are fucking big. Like, they're the miner itself, not its butt, like the tick part. The actual mining part itself, with it is the size of a freaking hammerhead. They're massive, and then those like bulbous butts that they have that has the ore in it is probably as large as an Idris. Probably not. I'm probably a little over exaggerating that, but they're huge. Like, the perspective is so weird, but only one person is required to operate them, and they can be operated remotely or autonomously. Is Kovalex really as independent as they say? Yeah, mostly. Let me see if I can find a good perspective on that. Okay, this is a perspective. This gives you a context. The right is a hornet. I'll keep it up for a moment. Your typing sounds like the sound effects. I'm in. I love the clickety clacks. I'll have to probably get a different keyboard though, because this one's too loud. It's single operator. There's like a cab right here that you can operate it in. Okay, here we go. This is a white box version of it. Give you context. This is another. This is a player. The new magnetic keyboards are really quite awesome. Let's take a look into it. That's a white box from 2014. So here's another image, another comparison. There's the Hornet and there's the Cygnus. It's kaiju sized. So a mining drone twice the size of a Stanton bunker. Yeah, probably about that. Note, this area right here is all for the operations. This is just for containing the ore that it mines. And there are dozens, if not 100 of these mines, mining ticks that operate out of Archon Base, which is the base that is the main location, one of the main locations for Squadron. It is in Squadron. It may end up in Star Citizen because anything that's in Star Squadron will probably eventually make it in Star Citizen. The question is, how will it operate? Because there's absolutely no way you can transport these. So this will be one of those that you probably build on your space stations when crafting and building comes out. You build one of these things to operate for you. You don't, it doesn't have a quantum drive on it or anything. It's just a mining tick. Any other questions, y'all? Oh, I also forgot. I'm going to be doing miscellaneous ships of the UE Navy, and then after I do the miscellaneous ships of the UE Navy, I'm going to be doing the You said they operate from one specific mining base? Archon Base, which is in Hades. Not Hades. Orion. It's in the Orion system. I'll pull this up again because it's always good to pull this up.
I do solemnly pledge, mind and body, I will defend the Empire with my life.
Your application to the Flight Academy has been reconsidered. Captain McLaren had submitted a letter of recommendation on your behalf before the battle.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine.
We may be a small crew, but the work we do matters.
Welcome to the Stanton. I'm Eugene Morrow.
I'm Petty Officer Webster, Chief Mechanic.
This will be your new home.
We got you flying with Lieutenant Commander Colton. He's one of our best.
Sir?
Who the hell are you?
I'm your new wingman, sir. The name's...
You want me to learn your name? You live long enough for me to care.
Baron Actual, you're clear to launch.
Launching in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Orion, or the Orion system. That's a tip right there. That's the tip. Nope. This is the one that was at the end of the... Not new. Make the PGR. We're actually having this up. How good is the overall story for Squadron 42? Okay, so this is where I always have to mention that I know most of the story for Squadron. And I don't want to spoil it for you. Okay? Now, there could be things have changed because the stuff that I accidentally spoiled myself on. Long story, but effectively, I accidentally found out the entire story of Squadron. The thing that I can tell you about it is that it is, in my opinion, a okay story. It's not groundbreaking. It's not world-changing. It's serviceable. The plot isn't really the main focus of Squadron. It's sort of, you're sort of bouncing from place to place, mostly. The main focus is the characters. Like your relationship with the characters, your character, the characters themselves and how they are, and sort of their connection to the overall plot. The best way of describing Squadron is you are not Commander Shepard. You're not the Master Chief. You're not Doom Guy. You're just some guy. You're just the right place, the right person in the wrong place at the right time. You are Joe McSpace Person. You are Jane Space Esquire, whatever. You are just a pilot. And you're asked to do crazy things. That's all. Yeah, the actors fucking bring their fucking game. That's the best part about it. you think we'll see a possible Xi'an capital ship in the trailer of 2023? No comment. I love being nobody. I'm very good at it in IRL. I mean, I think that's the wonderful thing about Squadron is that its approach to storytelling is not a power fantasy. It's designed to ground you into trying to be just a pilot. You're just a person, which is very similar to like Wing Commander. The Wing Commander kind of goes away from that towards the end. And that sort of boots on the ground, average perception of what's going on is I think a good way of telling stories because it's more human. We can more relate to a dude who just happens to be in a place where their job is to do this thing versus, an unkillable super soldier. I don't want to, Coleman, I don't want to spoil you on that. So that's why I'm saying I'm not going to talk about that because anything I talk about that, even if they showed it, would be a spoiler. Who blew up our entire place? Oh, just some guy. As someone who spoiled the story for themselves, I think the plot of Squadron 42 is better than any of the Mass Effect main plots. Then again, I've always thought ME plots were fucking awful. The thing that I think a lot of people, I don't think CIG is doing this well, and I'm afraid they will fuck this up, is much of the plot of Squadron 42 is a mystery. And I don't mean that as in we don't know what it is. I mean, it's literally a mystery. You're set about investigating something that's happening, and you have to solve what it is before time runs out. And every mission is slowly unraveling what is going on around you. And again, you are just some guy. I listened to the audio files, Rufus. So back in 2016, there was a leak of all of the audio files of basically like the main branch of Star Citizen. It was an accidental leak. We call it the Jared leak, but it's not Jared's fault. Jared was simply sharing screenshots that he was able to get, and he even tried to redact some of the links that he had up on the screen when he did it. But there was a partial link and people found out the rest of it. And when they found out the rest of it, they found out that CIG was not password protecting their files. So they was on just an AWS server without a password protection. So people were able to download the entirety of the build, like basically the main build of Star Citizen and Squadron. And from that, we learned a lot about what Star Citizen is doing. That's where we got the information for the actual files for the Pegasus, where we learned about the Retribution. But I wasn't actually looking for those audio files because I didn't know that there were Squadron audio files. The way CIG labels their audio is not like Star Citizen, Mission 5, Episode 1 or whatever. It's just strings of numbers. And we were looking for a specific audio file, which was the person who had access to this file had downloaded this before during the leak. I came to them because I knew they had that leak build, and I was looking for a specific line that I could pull, which would be crisp, which was Tessa Bannister's distress bacon comment, because this is well after she was taken out of the game. And so he started giving me files which were smaller in size to try to find it. We eventually found it, which was nice. But part of those files were squadron files, and we were like, is this Star Citizen or Squadron? Because like there's some other things, like things I will be happy to talk about, which is each of the mission givers had their own mission chains. Like Twitch Pacheco, Tisa Pacheco, she legitimately she legitimately had like a 12 mission chain. Like at one point you were going to get booze with her. Like she would meet you in a bar at G-Lock and you'd get drunk with her. That was one of the missions. So like that was just for Twitch. There was for Ruto, for Miles Eckhart, for all of the mission givers that were once there. They all had their own personalized mission chain you were going to do. That's completely been thrown out the window. So, that's why I'm comfortable talking about that. But part of those files that we also heard were squadron files that we realized what they were. And we realized about 3 or 4 files in, like a major twist was revealed. And I was like, oh, fuck, we already know the fucking story. We know the major plot twist. Let's just keep going till we can find the actual files. So. My point, I think people will really like Squadron story. Yeah, it's not groundbreaking, but it's still better than most game stories. Well, there'll be people, Ozma, who will legitimately judge it and say if it's not the best game story that has ever been told in humanity, then it's a failed project. Which I think is the wrong way of looking at Squadron. It just has to be good enough. But I try to keep people's expectations lower because it's easier to have low expectations going in because again, things could have changed, could have gotten worse. We don't know because I haven't really seen anything. I haven't seen anything that discredits what I've heard and what I've seen, but I will say that what I've learned from those files made me more interested in playing Squadron, even if I knew the twists, rather than less interested. But I am not telling you the twist because I feel like if you are going to play the game for the first time, not knowing the twist, you will have a better time overall. What about the Squadron 42's plot versus the plot of Ace Combat 7? They're not the same kind of game. And as far as I can tell, you're nothing like the protagonist of Ace 7. I mean, I get what you mean, Ozma. The plot itself isn't bad. It's just not like great. If you play Squadron and focus on the character interactions and the immersion that they tried to put you into in terms of making you play this character. But it's not an RPG. You can't make decisions which will change the entire path of your future or the future of the universe. You're just impacting little details. Like the game is going to end the same way no matter what. There's not going to be multiple endings for Squadron. There will be consequences for your choices about what you do, and that will change sort of what's left at the end of the ending, but the ending is going to be the same. Is Ben Mendelsohn's character secretly a Vandal sympathizer? Ben Mendelsohn's character is just trying to make some fucking money, man. Oh, there's always a Chris cameo. At one point, I knew Chris's cameo But I don't remember. I'll have to ask my friend who knows Chris's cameo. I don't want to know I don't want to know it that is good, but it's also good that it's not affecting the knowing too much. Yeah. Will we be able to create our own custom character, or is there a main protagonist which can't be changed? I don't want to go too much into depth on this one, but yes, you will be able to create your own custom character. The system that exists in Star Citizen is the same system that's in Squadron. In fact, it's the same system. In fact, it was developed for Squadron, and then they put it over to Star Citizen. So in theory, you could actually make your own character, just your character from Star Citizen, if it uses the same technology. In the demo, what they show is that you can start off as a base character with specific voice, That's not a custom character. That's a choice of like 6 different swatches. But what I can tell you is that that's not the last time you can create your character. And I'm not going to go any further because that's fucking spoilers. Something I always wanted to ask, will you be able to play as other races in Star Citizen when it's out? They want to be able to allow you to play other races eventually, but that's not every time they've mentioned it as a post-release feature. In fact, they've said if they were going to do a paid DLC for like an expansion for Star Citizen, it would be alien races. I mean, you essentially just spoiled it. Not necessarily. You can custom create your character, just not at the very beginning. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to tell you how it's possible, where it happens, how it happens. It's just, that's where it is. If you pay attention to a lot of what's going on in some of the previews, you kind of can guess how it happens, but just wait for the game to come out. You'll find it. But CIG's already said the character creation screen in Squadron 42 is the same as the Star Citizen. In fact, they built it for Squadron 42 and then exported it to Star Citizen. So yes, you will be able to create a custom character. I hope they give us a playable demo for Squadron. Hopefully what they showed off last year at CitizenCon. I'd love to see that. I don't think they will. I think it's a good move, but the question is how much effort and how much resources would it be to create a publicly available demo of that first prologue scene, of that prologue, versus just completing the game. They've actually gone over that, Fizzle. Fizzle says, I wonder how plastic surgery works with the Ibrahim sphere imprint. I guess you need to re-imprint. No. So, well, yes and no. The way it works is what you have is more than just a genetic imprint. It's also a mental imprint. And they have the Calliope, Project Calliope, which is effectively outpatient, easy access plastic surgery. And it's not just plastic surgery, it's full body change. Like, you can change everything You can change, in lore, you can change your height, you can change your weight, you can change your facial features, you can change your sex, you can change everything. It's fundamentally ground up human changing. And the technology they use to build that is the basis of the regen serum that was used for regen. In fiction, in gameplay, the way it works is just you respawn as whoever you were before. But the way that I'm sure CIG is going to make it work is that when you imprint, you save that character as they were at that point. So when you regen, you go back to that character. So I could see CIG doing that, saying, well, in lore, this is the way it works. And it's a great way of forcing players after they've changed their character, because even though you can do character customization now and you can kind of do it on the fly, eventually they'll do it so that you have to go to like a facility, like a medical facility to access it, to do those changes, like you can do in other games. But it'll cost you money, in-game money. That you'll have to, after you do that, you'll have to re-imprint to make sure that you save those changes. Nothing is there. What did you say? I don't remember. The last thing I saw was also I had the ending to Squadron Episode 3 spoiled to me by CR himself, so I may have been more excited than most. Yeah. Chris, that's the other thing, is that Chris straight up Chris straight up spoiled the entirety of Star Citizen and Squad 42's plot. Like, he was doing so routinely in the early days. Like the first 2 years, he would just tell anybody. Ninetales went criminals when they outlawed furry conventions. I say this somewhat as a joke, but I have said this many times before that, like, in lore, there is no, based off of the technology we have, there is nothing that's stopping humans from turning themselves into whatever they want, either through cybernetic means or through biological manipulation. So, and it's one of those weird things where in science fiction universes, they try to stay away from this sort of thing as much as possible. I think partially, especially for video games, is because of how complicated it can be. But like the number of people who would turn themselves into cat girls at the drop of a hat in the gaming community is massive. So I always think like that's a natural human reaction that people have for whatever reason. And it's not even a modern thing. It's, you look through history, people have those sorts of fucking weird inclinations forever. So it's weird that it's never reflective in science fiction, or rarely reflective in science fiction. Yeah, we're about to wrap up here. How often do devs go to Bar Citizens, especially cities where they don't have a studio? Rarely in cities that don't have a studio, but they're pretty frequently in cities that do have studios. It really depends on when it is and how busy they are. Like, sometimes during the summer they'll show up. Thanks to this analogy, a 6 foot, 320 pound mafia member can go into witness protection, become a 4'7" Asian woman. 100%. Like, Calliope is a fucking miracle, man. It is, and it was built for the military. It was main purpose was to build so that if a military member was like fundamentally like changed, they could like change themselves back to where they were before major accidents. But if you can change yourself back to where you were before, there's nothing you couldn't improve or change for yourself, period. And so Calliope just said, fuck it, let's go crazy. Yeah, like, I know a lot of the, Bearded likes to show up to a lot of the Star Citizen bar citizens. I've seen Bearded show up. A lot of the QA folks in Austin show up to hang out. We're not going to see height changing in Star Citizen yet, though CIG has said routinely that they want to do that. They want you to be able to have height and body change sliders as much as they want, as much as you can in your face. But I know that there's other limitations to that. Yeah, I remember correctly, you can go back through some of the old lore updates and find Squadron spoilers in them. Fuck, I mean, one of the major spoilers before they released the preview was that the Gauntlet was destroyed by crashing into the Kingship. Like, they posted that on the Galactopedia page a year before like in 2023. I was just like, when I saw that, I was like, CIG spoiling it for themselves. I didn't even have to spoil that shit. The end of the demo, the Squadron 42 demo, they spoiled that a year ahead in a Galactopedia update. Because you got to remember, the Star Citizen universe right now, it's 2955. The events of Squadron 42 take place in 2945, 10 years before. So, to us, in living in Star Citizen, the events of Squadron are old news. They're a decade plus old. Yeah. Basically, what I'm trying to say is if you want to know the story of Squadron 42, it takes you 5 minutes to find it. You can find it easily. There are records of the plot summaries, the mission summaries. I think even the script was leaked at one point. Audio files, everything. Like, you can find all of it. You can find all the twists if you wanted to. I just suggest not to, because A, we don't know how much has changed, and B, if you're going to play the game, you just don't bother. It's better to keep yourself secret. It's recent history. Well, I mean, it's effectively talking about events that happened in 2015. Like, you should know what you were doing or what was going on, especially major events in 2015. Yeah, as Ozoma says, you can find it on Reddit. There's remnants of it, a CR post that spoils episode 3. What did Automod block you for? Oh, fingers in. Anywho, we're gonna wrap this up. I'm going to post the next video on Wednesday, and then I'm going to be doing another video for Patreons and members probably by Friday or Saturday. That video won't be out until like the 1st of July. So I'm gonna start pacing out the videos a little bit more. But my goal is to get like 5 or 6 videos done in the next month, so that you have plenty of videos in the backlog you can watch, especially if you're a Patreon. But it'll be ended up going out later, so like in August and September when I go back to work. I'm a teacher, day job. Then, yeah. Someone actually asked before as well, how many variations of shirts do I have? In my office, I have 4 different, technically 6 different, but I don't wear 2 of them very often. So 4 different shirts. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 ties. 15, I believe this one. And I have 1, 2, 5 vests. So I wear a lot of combinations. Some of them are designed to be together, like this purple one. I've got a red one that has a red tie, and a gold one that has a gold tie. But, you know, I wear lots of different things. Your stream lagged. Basically, Eve, I'm just going to be producing a lot of videos. There'll be a lot more videos coming out than you're used to, but most of them are going to be members only for at least a while, and then drop them. Like, one of the videos is going to be the ships of the UAE Navy. I'm going to take all of the videos I did on the capital ships of the UAE Navy, the subcaps, the fighters and bombers, the miscellaneous ships. I'm going to take all of those videos, I'm going to smash them together into like an hour-and-a-half video. That's going to be one of them. That'll release probably in like early August. But, you know, and one of them is going to be the complete history of Star Citizen Universe Part 5. And there'll be one that I'll be doing on AI, the AI in Star Citizen. I'll be doing one on Hathor eventually. I'll be doing one on the food of the Star Citizen universe. I'm going to be doing a primer on like the story of Star Citizen, and then I'm going to be doing a system survey on Stanton, all sorts of things. So, do you dress up this nicely for your students, or are we special? I do at the beginning of the year for my students, and then I get more casual, but I always try to keep it professional, usually a button-up shirt of some kind. But you are special, Jaden. That's just that way. All right, y'all. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for watching. And like I always say, remember, ex Historia, ad Astra.